What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Engine25 YouTube channel. My name is Brandon, and pretty excited about today's episode. But first, of course, if you like what you hear, then if you would please hit that subscribe button down below. We're also on Spotify now. You can find us there, and I once a week or whenever I can, I like to grab some friends together and talk about movies, and we'd love to have you. So thanks for watching, and here we're gonna get into it. This week, I've got some old friends of mine, and we're talking about Fellowship of the Ring because by the time this is live, uh, it will have been 20 years since the Fellowship of the Ring came out in theaters. December 19th, 2001. So that's pretty cool. It's now 2021. So if there's a two in there that was a zero before, and it's so Adam is a really good friend of mine. I've known longer. Or no, did I know you? No, I met you like shortly after this came out. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
we met. The year after. I think we met about when Two Towers came out.
we went. I know we went to see Return of the King together. To the
Yes,
Two
we
Towers we
quoted the
watched on
entire movie
DVD
opening night.
at your house. But yeah. So this I've known Adam for about as long as this movie's existed. How you doing, Adam?
It was
What's going on
very
with you?
much in vogue when we met.
It was kind of the thing. You know what I mean? Like it had been a couple of years since the last Star Wars movie. The Matrix had faded away before the sequels came back around and brought that back. So yeah, like Lord of the Rings was kind of a big deal at this point in time. Um, and I got Chris here, who's a gaming buddy who we used to fly some spaceships around on the table at the game shop.
Yes, we
Um,
did.
how you doing, Chris?
Doing great, man. I'm very excited about this. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, and
Me
getting
too.
being able to talk about it with people and kind of discuss some of the things that come to my attention. I'm really happy to do that. So, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you guys let me nerd out with you for a little bit.
Absolutely, I appreciate you being here, and I will say I don't. I post on social media blast messages to see. It's does anyone want to be a guest on a show if I talk about this movie? And I don't often get responses. I usually, I contact my guests directly most of the time. And both of you guys were like enthusiastic about, hey, I want to do that. So
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
absolutely. Thank you.
Um,
But
do you remember going to the movie theater to see the movie? Is that my Chris? I'll go to you first.
Yep. I had just moved here from Kentucky in the beginning of 2020, and so I was still kind of new
For
to the.
beginning of 2020.
Yeah, I was 2020, 2000, excuse me.
Okay,
20
I
years.
was
Let's
like,
try this
I
again. So yeah,
I met you before
so
that. Yeah.
let's try this again. So to middle of 2000 or early 2000, I moved from Kentucky to here, and I still get to know the area. But I was working in the Dunwoody area at a restaurant,
Cool.
and I remember getting off work on that Friday and then going straight to the movie theater over by Perimeter Mall in Atlanta. That and seeing it there and was just absolutely just blown away. But it was one of those midnight things. So yeah, I got off work at 11 and
Nice.
yeah, went to the midnight showing, which was like all this new in vogue stuff that hadn't happened before.
How
And
old were you at the time, if I might ask?
see, I was 24.
24. Okay, yeah. And Adam and I were both in middle school, so
I am
we're
considerably older. Yes.
that's all good. I don't mean to call you out, but
Oh no, not at all.
also,
Not
um,
at all.
what about you? Do you remember going to see this the first movie?
I do remember going to see it. I don't remember if we saw it near opening or not. At the time, my family didn't go to a movie on opening day unless it was like Star Wars.
Mine really didn't either. Yeah.
Yeah, like Star Wars, or if it was like the Will Smith movie that came out on the 4th of July every year for a while. Like
That's true.
movies that we went to on opening day. But I'm pretty sure I know we saw it in theaters, and it was probably close to because didn't it release on or near Christmas?
Yeah, December 19th. It's usually
approximately,
like
yeah, yeah,
right around a week before Christmas Day, is what like or like the Friday
right,
before, basically,
right.
or
Yeah, we're talking about it right
Wednesday.
when it. So we probably went on Christmas,
Cool.
but
Yeah.
yeah, my dad took us because he was a big Lord of the Rings fan. I hadn't read the books yet. I was just a Harry Potter fan at the time. So
It's I'm glad you mentioned that. My dad was a big Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit book fan at the time. Oh, I should have pulled it out. Can I get to it? Not in 2001. I was in, I want to say, fifth grade. Yeah, it would have been fifth grade for Christmas. My dad gave me this big, like, boxed, multi-volume uh, set of the novels. It had The Hobbit and the three Lord of the Rings books in it. Um, and now, yeah, I'm going to get it because it might not show because I got my background blurred out. But give me just a sec. So he was a big fan, and what basically what happened was he found out they were making the movie. Get my headphones back on in case you guys are playing. He found out they were making the movie, and then he had this idea to give me the books and make me read the books. Will you show them? Come on, it's a really cool, and I still have it, and it's all right. It's not gonna work. There it is. Well, you can see that. Will you show the cover? No, it really doesn't want to show the covers, but yeah. So that's 20 years old now. So my dad bought that for me to read, so he could take us to see the movie the year. This would have been the year before the movie actually came out. I don't read. I did read. Heck, I did read them, but I didn't quite get through the end of Fellowship before the movie came out. I just don't read very fast, and back then we had stupid reading tests. You had to read you had to choose from a list of certain books or whatever, and it used up all my reading time. But yeah, so I read The Hobbit, and then I got about 2/3 of the way through Fellowship of the Ring before the movie came out. I adored the movie, but then I did that lazy thing, and then decided, all right, I don't need to finish this book, and then I went directly over to the Two Towers, which I did read before the movie. But yeah, and it would have been it's like the week between Christmas and New Year's. It's my we didn't go we certainly didn't go opening day, but yeah, like probably right after Christmas, couple of days. My dad was he just said, you wanna go see Lord of the Rings? It's supposed to be pretty good. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And I watched it took a while to come out on DVD, but I remember like my grandmother took me to the store to get to buy it on DVD the next summer before my parents got home from work that day or whatever. My grandma came over, took me to Walmart because I couldn't. We were too young to drive. And then I probably watched Fellowship of the Ring like literally once a week between getting that DVD and when the Two Towers came out in theaters. Like probably like, and it's a 3-hour movie, and this is before at that point would have been the theatrical cut, obviously, but it's a 3-hour movie that I've probably sat down and watched an average of once every 7 days for the 5 months or whatever until the sequel. And I can't even really say that I have done that with like Star Wars, even like it's Lord of the Rings definitely had a very profound effect on me. What do you remember? Do you remember how you felt about it? Like it's hard to remember specific things 20 years ago, and at this point, it's clouded by all the dozens of times I've watched it since. But like, do you remember how you felt about it way back? Chris, go first.
Yeah, I was blown away. My dad, very similar to you. I mean, my dad got me into the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit at a younger age. The Hobbit was originally written in 1937 on a sixth grade reading level, so I read it in fifth, sixth, seventh grade. I was a little
right.
bit.
Yeah, it was fifth grade. I want to say is when he gave me that big set I just showed you.
And but he always had the books around though.
Right.
In fact, that set that you have that you were holding in your hand, I think he had something similar, but 10, 15 years beforehand.
Yeah,
It looks like it's exactly the
there's
same.
the books aren't illustrated, but the covers
Right.
are John Howe, Alan Lee
Hmm.
art, and
Yeah.
those are um the big artists that inspired
Right.
a lot of the artwork in the movies. They were drawing Lord of the Rings decades before the movies came out, and that's kind of why Peter Jackson hired them to design his movie,
Exactly. Right.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like watercolors
Yeah.
on a watercolor painting on the cover of this box set.
Yeah, I remember very distinctly the Alan Lee paintings on the side of it, and then on the covers and all that. So I remember that vividly, and they were just always in the house. I always had them, so I always had access to them. And so I read that, and then I read in high school, the Lord of the Rings. It took me forever because I like to read, but I'm a very slow reader. I want to get every word and understand everything, and it being such a much more difficult read because the old joke with Tolkien is every blade of grass has a name. And so you have to kind of remember all of this stuff as you're going through everything. But being able to see things come direct from page, because all you have is mental image, or if you've watched any of the the animated ones that came out in 77 and 79, you have these ideas of what everything should look like. But when Peter Jackson brought this out, and the first thing you see, is that you have a vivid memory with is Gandalf looking exactly the way Gandalf should look. That's the big pointy hat and the big gray, burlap sack, that he was wearing or whatever. It was just one of those things you're like, wow, that's exactly how I remember how that should look. And then you see, Frodo again, big eyes, hair all over the place, just exactly the way that he was described in the book. There he is, and I'm just sitting here going, oh, this is really cool, So my initial reaction to it was I was enamored with it. I fell in love with it all over again, and I probably watched it 2 or 3 times in the theater, that same year, but before
I tried to get someone to take me again, but even though, my dad really liked the movie, but it's difficult to get him to go to the theater the first time. Um, so, uh, going to sit through a 3-hour movie again shortly after seeing it the first time um, isn't something that my parents like to do,
Yeah.
but that's okay. Yeah, so
One thing,
I saw it that first time right after Christmas, and then I waited 6 months or 8 months or whatever. What were you gonna say, Adam?
I want to say my dad took me at least twice in the theaters because that was the first time that my dad was the fanboy for something.
Yep.
Yeah, and I felt that way too.
And
Like my dad was really
no.
excited about this, and I liked the book, as much as I like reading anything that I had read at that point. You know what I mean? Like, but it was no, like it's I really interesting. Remember, I was in the Boy Scouts, and then every Monday night, my dad would pick me up, or drive me and pick me up to the Boy Scouts, and then we would like go to the convenience store and pick up milk or something on the way home, and then there's like I have really clear memories of like just sitting in the front seat talking to my dad about Lord of the Rings, like as I was reading through that first book, and then even shortly after the movie came out, it was just like. And he was the one who had introduced me to Star Wars, and I had an older brother. Doug's met my brother. He's 6 years ahead of me. So when I was a kid, he was already into his teenage years, and my parents weren't that strict about what he could watch, right? But it was also difficult to prevent me and my younger brother from watching the things that my oldest brother was watching.
Right.
If that makes sense. So he was showing my older brother like Alien and Terminator, and like The Godfather, these movies that he really liked when he was in his 20s. And we were all at home watching all of them. My dad is the one who took me to see Jurassic Park. Was like, I was 4 years old when Jurassic Park came out, and I told it on the show before, but like we lied to my mom and said we were going to see that animated Batman movie, Mask of the Phantasm, because she didn't want me to go see the scary dinosaur movie. And then and that's really kind of determined my career path. Like I wanted to be involved in filmmaking or like technology related to filmmaking as long as I can remember. Basically because I went to a theater once and I saw a dinosaur and I wanted to make movies with dinosaurs.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And then uh, uh, Lord of the Ring, or certainly Jurassic Park, and then Star Wars. I first saw when I was 6 or 7. With it's my dad. He bought the box set and he put in the tape and basically said, "Hey, watch this. You're gonna think it's really cool." And then that's why I love Star Wars and that's why I love Lord of the Rings.
Awesome.
Um, hmm. What's your favorite part of the movie if you can pick one? Adam, I'll go to you this time.
The first 20 or so minutes of the theatrical version. I guess, well, maybe not the first 20 minutes, but like the 20 minutes after Frodo leaves with the ring. So like the second 20-minute block or so.
Right.
And that's because nothing on this planet gets me in the mood to sit down with my D&D handbook and want to roll dice than like them running from the Nazgul through the forest.
Yes.
And them walking up to the gate at Bree where they knock on the door and the guy opens it up. And he's like, "What's your business?" He's like, "We're at the inn. We're going to the inn. Our business is our own." He's like, "Oh, no offense. My job to ask questions after dark. There's talk of strange folks about." And like that is the most RPG line.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the reason it's the most RPG line is because Tolkien wrote it and everybody copied him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the foundation of everything. But like that's after that, after they leave Bree, then it becomes the adventure of the ring bearer and so on. But when they get up until they get to Bree, it's just them being in Middle Earth. And it's
just really living their lives.
Yeah, it's the richest that you see Peter Jackson's Middle Earth until maybe you hit Edoras. Like that's the next time you start to see people being people in Middle Earth.
That's fair.
Because the elves don't count.
Elves are weird. Yeah. What about you, Chris? If you could pick like a scene or a chunk of the movie that you really like.
Yeah, so going back to what he was saying there, he's 100% right. You're knocking at the door at the prancing pony, and he's saying, "Well, my business is my own." It's like the first thing I thought of, because I've been a D&D player for years as well. It's like, wow, that little halfling just rolled a nat 20 on his charisma roll. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of, and like that was awesome.
Like he was kind of sassy, except that the guy like didn't question. He was just like, "All right, cool."
He's like, "Okay, cool, go for it, little man." I mean, like, that I just thought I'd busted out laughing.
And I will point out that the reason I like D&D so much is mostly because of pointing the wrong way, because of this guy. Adam really got me into tabletop gaming in college.
Yeah, I loved. I mean, I didn't start with D&D until I got out of college, but I loved it all the same. But my favorite part of the movie was right after his was Weathertop. When you first start seeing what evil really looked like in Jackson's mind, the hooded, cloaked figures that were kind of like effervescent or whatever the word is, where they're kind of like they're kind of peeling off, and you're very, very fluid and very malleable, and just and then when he puts the ring on, you're seeing what the two different sides look like with the ring on and off. I was just but the Weathertop, you could really tell that's the real beginning of the hero's journey, if you want to think of it that way, and was just what was really, really engulfed with that, and just thought, wow, okay, this is cinematographically, that's hard to say, really, really, really well done. So that was the hook,
Yeah, and that it's probably the first like real action scene in the movie. Like that's not to say the movie's slow, but it's like like Adam said, the first chunk of the movie after that prologue is just people living their lives, and it's mostly in that part. It's up until then, it's mostly hobbits, and hobbits live very simple, very quiet existence, despite this vast world that's around them, and and they're even when Sauron isn't trying to take over the world, there are kings and armies and gold mines and any number of amazing things. But no, these are just happy people living in their little corner until their whole world gets disrupted.
Yep.
And the movie it's a very slow ramp up until that's like you said, it's the first time that we really see what evil is really like in this world.
Right.
And it's also, it's the first time that the hobbits have really encountered anything like that before. They have that brief moment with the Nazgul where they're hiding under the tree and they're like, very clearly something isn't right about this thing. But, they don't really get it until Frodo gets stabbed on Weathertop, and they're, it's kind of, that's the big turn. Like, oh shit, something's really going on here.
Yep.
I probably would have to say, like, I really like the development stuff with the one, I really like the council scene up through probably Moria, where Gandalf falls. That's that first, that's 30 to 45 minutes. It's a significant amount of time, but we get a lot of time with each character. Everybody has a moment. There's the scene where Boromir's teaching them how to fight, and then they get they get snooped on by Sauron's birds, and then they go up the mountain, and Boromir has that moment where he's holding the ring. It's just like, this is this tiny little thing. Why does it matter so much? And then we go into Moria, which is just all around awesome. Just it's well designed, it's well paced. Ian McKellen gave an Oscar-nominated performance, like basically sitting on a rock talking to Frodo. So it's if I were to pick any, as specific as I can be, it's probably Moria is my favorite piece of the movie. And it's traveling through the darkness, and then the big fight scene, and then the Balrog, which is still one of the coolest things that's ever been put in a movie before.
That's true.
It's true, and it looks really good. If you ever get a chance to watch the 4K version, it's because the fire effects on the Balrog are actual fire. Like there's CGI obviously, but like it's the new 4K version that I actually probably recommend. It's got a really crisp transfer. I think it's miles better than the Blu-ray version. Like, I would rather rewatch my old DVDs than put in the Blu-ray, because I don't think the Blu-rays look very good. And this is exactly a thing that I promised we wouldn't touch on. We talked about it in the pre-show, but no, yeah, like the Balrog on the 4K version looks like even more dope than it ever has.
Yes. I loved the Balrog scene. I thought it was one of those things that you see it for the first time and you automatically know what's happening. I mean, you're taken there. Me being the purist, if you will, Balrogs don't have wings. They're cloaked in darkness and cloaked in fire, but they don't. In the books, they don't have wings. There's nothing.
Are you sure? There's something like he spread. I mean, and you've probably read it more recently than I have. But like, there's a moment where it's like it spreads its arms wall to wall, or like wings or something. I thought it was wings.
Yeah, the darkness. If I can get the lyric right, or the words right, the darkness spread behind him like it was like the wings blocking out sun. Is basically how it was saying. So, but I mean, it was one of those things. I'm like, but they don't have wings. But you get over that really quickly by watching how it interacts with Gandalf, and how it moves and how fluid it was, and how, as weird as it is to say, lifelike it was. You realize that you'd stepped into a real fantasy setting that had a bigger meaning than just being on the surface,
And up until that point in the movie, most of the evil was, at least from an appearance point of view, very subtle. There's something very disconcerting about the Nazgul, but that could just be a guy in a cloak for all we know, really. There's some kind of magical presence, like the insects and stuff tried to run away from it when they were under the log. But, and we get a little bit of a monster with the Watcher of the Water. And then we get the goblins, which are, a little bit on the gross side, but it's just like the Balrog comes out and is like, okay, there is some really ancient evil in this world that is
Right.
still around, and if you go look it in the wrong place, you're going to stumble on something that you don't want to find.
Well,
one of the things.
and pacing wise, I mean, obviously this isn't just the movie, this is the story in general, but pacing wise, it comes right after the cave troll,
Yep.
which that's the first thing that you see in the movie. I mean, besides watching the water, but there's the cave troll where it fights them and it's just raking through everybody, and then they finally bring down the cave troll, and you're like, holy cow, that was
like
ridiculous.
how did we beat
but
this
these
thing?
dudes are bad.
Yep.
Like, yeah, these guys are awesome. They can handle anything. And then you go down the hallway a little bit, and Gandalf's like, "This foe is beyond any of you."
We should run away. We should go now.
What I love about it is that the way that they made everything look like the orcs and the goblins are grotesque. You know they're going to be evil, or you know they're going to be bad, or whatever. Or even with the cave troll, now you have big and ugly and bad and all that. But when it gets to the Nazgul, there's something a little bit different about them. There's a magic to them, or with the Balrog, there's something ancient and magic. There's something there. It's like you're seeing evil or bad on several different levels. But what's cool about it is that you're looking at the way that Tolkien wrote magic in a completely different way. Whereas, like, if you see, like in a Harry Potter movie, magic is with a wand and with some words, and his hat flips up, or whatever it is.
And there's colored light, and then something happens.
Yeah. Whereas you see, Gandalf basically blowing on a stone, and it lights up, or he starts quoting an incantation. I'm the keeper of the sacred flame, and flame of Udun and stuff like that. You're seeing it on a more global level, or like with Sauron at the top of the tower, doing his incantation to the birds and all, to the Watchers and all. You're seeing magic look in a completely different way that's never been shown on screen before, and I thought it was really, really cool.
And the subtlety is very smart, and I don't. That is it's certainly that way in Tolkien, but also. Peter Jackson could have leaned a little too heavy on some of the magical elements, and he, for the most part, the Lord of the Rings trilogy gets really restrained. I would say less so in the Hobbit movies, but the more distance between now and the Hobbit movies, the more it's kind of like, to a degree, the Star Wars prequels. It's like they're just the movies now. I appreciate them more now than I did when they were new. Sure. So that just is what it is. But Martin Freeman is just a joy to behold, and I'll stand on that hill until I die. But what do you have a favorite character? Like my favorite character in Lord of the Rings is Gandalf, like top to bottom. But do you any specific persons you'd like to call out in Lord of the Rings, Adam?
So originally, as a kid, Gimli was my favorite because he was hilarious and awesome. Because
that's true. These are all true things.
Like that. Yes. But as an adult, specifically with the extended version, because he's totally shafted in the theatrical version, Boromir is my favorite character. Because in the theatrical version, he's just the dude who gets corrupted, and he's kind of, chintzy, and he wants to steal the ring, and he's kind of a douchebag. But
you're not wrong.
He gets like 2 or 3 extra scenes that turn. It's like, no, actually, Boromir's a really cool guy.
That's probably my favorite scene that is added. Like, there isn't. Mm-hmm. I would argue, and we can talk about this in more detail if you like, but I would argue the extended version of the Fellowship of the Ring, it's mostly action beats that get put back in. I wouldn't argue there is much new stuff of substance until Two Towers and Return of the King extended, and that in each of those movies they add an hour. But there's dialogue between Boromir and Aragorn that takes place in Lothlorien in the extended version that's not in the theatrical, and it really is no, this guy really just wants what's best for his people, and it's not his fault that he's weak. It's just a thing. Yeah. It's a thing about humans that they are easily corruptible. Yeah. He wants to protect his people, and that's good on him.
Yeah, well, and that whole conversation is cut down to 2 lines each in the theatrical version.
Yeah, big time.
And it just makes Boromir look weaker because it's the end of that short conversation where he starts to break down because he wants to see home and wants to save home, etc. So you don't see the rest of Boromir being good. And even like you mentioned action beats earlier on when he's teaching Merry and Pippin how to fight, that goes a few beats longer in the extended version.
It does, yep.
Exactly right.
In the theatrical, he's teaching him how to fight, and then the birds show up. Whereas in the extended, he's teaching him how to fight, and then he accidentally like steps on one of the hobbits or something, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and then
they dogpile him. Yeah,
exactly. And then you see him like fall on the ground laughing, like while they're tackling him, and it's those little character beats that if you just added, 3 more minutes of movie to the theatrical version, then a lot of us who didn't watch the extended version for years wouldn't have just gone through most of our lives thinking Boromir's just a douchebag.
Right. Right.
That's fair.
That's one of the things I was thinking as well, is like they really cut him so much that you knew halfway through he wasn't. If you hadn't read the books, you knew he was going to be gotten rid of by the end of the movie anyway, because they didn't spend any time developing that character any more than him just being the son of the steward, but we're in the extended version that came out in 2002, or in the real extended version that came out in 2006, the 4-disc set that adds like an hour and a half, whatever, of edit. So that's where you get all the character study stuff. And they did it with Boromir. They did it with more with Strider or Aragorn. They did it more with even with Arwen and all that. They added a lot more of those character beats to it. Of course, you're going to have a lot more of that action as well, but it just made it really more of a cohesive story.
That's true. And I haven't, for years and years now, as far as I'm concerned, the extended versions of these movies are the only ones that exist.
Yeah.
So like I haven't done a whole lot of thinking about the differences between them in some times. So I looked up just a couple of bits, like, and I had that and I was like, really? Like all this stuff with Boromir wasn't in that version. That's crazy. And it's because he's set up almost like a villain in the theatrical version, and that's not the case. Like Denethor is his father is just a terrible human being top to bottom, but Boromir really is not. Boromir has as you learn later, he has a lot of respect for his little brother that nobody else seems to. But Boromir is he's a perfectly nice guy that has. He's just a little too thirsty.
Agreed.
Yeah, well, that was another scene that was added in the extended version of I guess it was either Two Towers or Return of the King, where you see Faramir and Boromir together. That's not in the theatrical.
It's not. No, yeah, that's in. It's in the extended version of the Two Towers.
Yep.
And it was actually that's the first appearance of Denethor actually, because he has a short bit in that scene before he comes into the Return of the King a little bit longer. But
right.
No, yeah, like there's, and again, I don't do a lot of thinking about the theatrical versions anymore because as far as I'm concerned, basically the extendeds are the only ones that exist. But
I guess I'm the outlier on the movie nerds who actually like Lord of the Rings, and that's the Lord of the Rings movies, because I didn't watch the extended until probably 2 or 3 years ago. When I bought them on Amazon, because they had them on sale for the digital version for really cheap. So I grabbed those and sat down and finally actually watched the extended version. For most of the 20 years since it came out, I only ever watched the theatrical.
Right.
So,
I was working at Best Buy at the time when the extended versions came out. The big book versions. And
I got them downstairs.
I got the one that had the Argonath, the book stands and all that as well.
Yeah.
And,
I wanted that one, except that one was like $100 when it came out.
Oh, yeah, I paid it, and it was worth every penny to me.
These days I'm not one to scoff at prices of collectibles, but my parents were already wondering, you already own this movie, why is this version another $50?
It's not worth it. Just shut up. And I bought the one that came out in 2002, and once the one in 2006 came, I gave that one to my dad, because and he watched it on a regular basis, so So it got its money's worth.
Any where it's little going a little over a half hour. Anything else you want to talk about? How do you think Fellowship of the Ring compares to the other two films? Chris, you go first.
So the first movie, the Fellowship of the Ring, is your character study. It's you getting to know all of the characters that are in the Fellowship. You know, all the supporting characters like the Arwyns and the Sarumans and stuff like that, and getting just kind of putting the little dabs of who they are in there. So you're really not getting the full, taste of them until the middle of Two Towers. Where everything starts really coming to the crescendo. Now you're seeing the hero's journey coming from Frodo, even though you don't expect it, with Samwise at the end as well. You see Gandalf, you see Aragorn, all becoming into these immaculate people. So it's a little bit slower to me than the rest of them, but it does so on purpose. It never loses that purpose of trying to introduce you and get you not only familiar with, but siding with Frodo and Bilbo in some cases, and Samwise and Merry and all. It wants you to really become almost like it wants you to be the 10th member of the Fellowship. It wants you to kind of go on this journey with them, but you're only seeing it in bits and pieces. Whereas in the extended, you get a lot more of that. But it's really a character expose until about halfway through Two Towers, where we get Gandalf the White.
Right. And that's when the heat of what's really coming. Like there's a war coming, and that's when the second half of the Two Towers is when that really picks up.
Yep.
What about you, Adam? Do you have a favorite of the three movies, or like how do you think this one compares to the other two?
It is so hard to pick a favorite from
yes,
them.
It is.
I love all three, but I think Two Towers is probably my favorite, and Fellowship is a close second. And I think a large part of that is because both of those movies, Two Towers and Fellowship, are the two that I have a specific purpose for in my life. When I want to get into a D&D mood, I watch Fellowship. And when I want to paint miniatures, I watch Two Towers.
Excellent.
It's just like the sound background of it. I don't know what it is about them, but those two movies make me want to do those two things.
It's Treebeard. That's what it is. It's Treebeard.
It's Treebeard, yeah. Treebeard and just words of Uruk-hai.
Tree.
Oh God! Do you? I mean I mean, it's just so hard to pick. Like you mentioned the Two Towers, like, and I was about to butt in. Like, do you remember how friggin' cool it was the first time you watched Helm's Deep? Like,
that's probably why it's still my favorite of the trilogy.
Yeah, it's so good.
Like Helm's Deep happened, and it was the coolest fantasy / sword and shield warfare scene in cinematic history.
Yeah,
and then
like
they spent the entire time between Helm's Deep and Return of the King hyping up how much cooler
Minas Tirith.
the battle of Minas Tirith is going to be, and then it wasn't. I mean, it was awesome. It is also a great battle, but it is not cooler than Helm's Deep.
What gets me about that is, and I'm right along the same lines as Adam here, is the first time you see the Battle of Helm's Deep, you're just blown away at the scale of it. Like, how in the world did they do this? I mean,
how did they convince someone to pay for this?
It
was like, and even more like I am these days. Like, I am more familiar with the nuts and bolts of filmmaking as I ever was. It's like, if like there's no way this movie happens in 2021. There's like no one would take, like, if the Lord of the Rings movies had never happened, like, no one would take about, like, maybe if maybe because of Game of Thrones they would make this, but like Lord of the Rings probably had a I'm sorry, go.
Been made by Game of Thrones. Because like Game of Thrones would never have been made without Lord of the Rings.
And that's probably fair. Like, and this I don't think like any film executive in their right mind would green light the
Well,
Lord of the Rings today if it had never happened before.
I think what was it? The story behind it was that New Line was essentially about to go out of business, so this was their like Hail Mary pass
Yeah.
to like dump as much money as into it. But to your point that this would never get made again or today, well, I mean, look, they tried. They tried to do it with The Hobbit, and they literally cut all of the corners that made Lord of the Rings as special as it was
Right.
as a movie.
Yeah.
Like that's part of what killed the mood and just the Hobbit movies for me was that everything that made Lord of the Rings special, what made it not just another movie, was the attention to detail and the real effort and love that went into it, and that was just not there in the Hobbit, at least from an outsider's perspective.
I can see that.
I won't disagree. I will say again that I adore Martin Freeman as Bilbo.
Yes.
You know, and I'm not going to argue that I'm not going to argue the Hobbit movies are good movies. You know, and you can't really compare them to Lord of the Rings. Right. That's not even a fair fight in any respect. But I really like Martin Freeman, and I just that I appreciate that performance more and more as we're more separated from it.
Yeah, you could tell that there's a little bit of difference because you're 100% right. There's a heart there that didn't seem like it was fully exposed in the Hobbit movies. But you could tell that this was a passion project for Peter Jackson when he originally did this. But listen to this. Stanley Kubrick, Michelangelo Antonioni, Jim Henson, Heinz Eidelman, John Borman, every one of these people looked at Tolkien's book and thought this would be unfilmable.
Yes, it was. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to list off that list of names, but like there are, I definitely recall there being talks of there's no way anyone can make this movie. So
Peter Jackson basically said, I can, but you're going to have to see things not from this lens, but you're going to see things from this lens here. He really, kind of like Lucas did in 77 with Star Wars, he changed the game with this one simply because he said, look, if you do this, you have to do this in the epic scale. You can't do it, in a 16:9. It really has to be like in a much more broad scale. And so he made it a passion project, and you could tell. And it every time you look at it, whether it's on TNT or if you watch one of the DVDs here, if you go to the movie theater, you can tell that there is something different about these movies.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's a great note to wrap up on. Does anyone have any closing thoughts? Anything that we haven't touched on you'd like to say, other than this was the moment I saw it and remains one of my favorite movies? I can't decide which of the Lord of the Rings trilogy I like. I kind of just think of it as one big thing, but it's always going to be going to hold a special place. And it's also available to subscribers of HBO Max. If you're, I don't know if it's unlikely anyone's gotten this deep in this video having not seen Lord of the Rings before, but you will know. Yeah, if you haven't seen it in a while and you want to check it out, it's on HBO Max. So you can check it out there. We are not sponsored by HBO Max. Any closing thoughts from either of you, Adam?
I mean, my closing thought, and I was thinking about this as I was setting up my camera and everything, was that I cannot thank enough Lord of the Rings, because I hadn't read the books before I saw the movie. I was a Harry Potter kid. I was generally a nerdy kid. I was into Star Wars and everything.
Also, the first Harry Potter film, 20 years old this year.
Yes, both happened in the same year, but Harry Potter is a very different kind of fantasy and would not have done the same things for really nerd culture in general. And like, I'm blessed, just like Brandon, you're blessed. Like, we grew up at the tail end of like nerds not being cool. Like, Lord of the Rings kind of started to make nerds cool in a way like nothing else ever did. But it's not a coincidence that like one of my favorite pastimes, probably my favorite pastime, which is Dungeons and Dragons, is exploding right now, right at the same time when like you and me, the kids, when this movie came out, finally have enough income to start buying all the books.
That
Like,
is probably
like
absolutely true. Yeah.
Harry, let's say nothing. Like Harry Potter made me want to go to Hogwarts. Lord of the Rings made me want to go off on an adventure. You know, grab the contract. I mean, it's Hobbit, but like I'm going on an adventure, and that's why Fellowship doesn't want to do that. And the world would not. I don't think we would see the renaissance of everything that we're seeing, fantasy-wise, if it had not been for Lord of the Rings.
I think you're
Because
absolutely right.
because Fellowship came out and the rest of the trilogy came out, and that's what made fantasy vogue enough that 10 years later we got Game of Thrones, and then Game of Thrones is what has made it now super vogue now, and I have Wheel of Time on Amazon, and D&D is the D&D books are constantly on Amazon's bestseller lists.
Mm-hmm.
Like the day that a new D&D source book drops, it's the #1 seller on Amazon. Like
there it
every
is.
time. Every time.
Yep.
It's a great world that we live in, and that's because of this movie franchise.
What about you, Chris? Anything to say before we wrap up?
Man, I look at this a little bit differently. Lord of the Rings came out, published July 29th, 1954.
Look at this guy doing his research. Like I barely had to run a show figured out. You know what I mean?
My dad was 10 when it came out, you know, which it just blows me away. And we're talking about something that's 70 years old that has had so much reach on everything. I mean, we wouldn't have D&D if it wasn't for that. We wouldn't have Magic the Gathering if we wouldn't have. I mean, when you have something like this that was even sung about by Led Zeppelin in 1971 off of on their 4th album, stuff like you don't understand the gravity of what you have here. There's so much source material here, and it took it to make this movie make it mainstream once and for all. You know, we don't have, you know, I mean, growing up in Kentucky when I did, we had the satanic panic of D&D and all that in the late 80s, early 90s and all this, but it was all based off of this movie here, of this book here. And then once this movie came out, we're like, okay, now this isn't what we said it was. This is something much deeper and there's a lot more layers to it and all that. So like you were saying, it started making the epic be more in vogue, and you start seeing a lot more of the things that are offshoots of like the Game of Thrones and the other high fantasy stuff that comes along like that. I mean, even with stuff like Critical Role, you know, Vox Machina, you know, have all of those guys over there as well. You know, all of this is all because of this one book, and this one book that gave us these amazing movies. I mean, it blows my mind about the reach of these things. And it's just even 20 years later, I'm still very, very pleased and very, very in tune with what it brings. So it's just mind blowing how one book, 2,000 pages, can change 100 years of history.
And I agree completely, and I think that's a great spot to wrap it up. So thanks, guys, very much for hanging out, and thanks for watching, everybody. Again, if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings or you like movies and other nerd-related things, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below. Oops, I just threw the wrong graphic, so I'm gonna keep pretending that I didn't say. I'm gonna roll forward as if I didn't point it out that I just made a mistake. But yeah, so hit that subscribe button down below, and we will see you next time. I'm looking to do look out probably next week or so for a review of Spider-Man: No Way Home. Sometime between Christmas and New Year's, I'm going to review The Matrix Resurrections. We'll see how that goes. And thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yes, take care. Have a good night.
Have a good one.